Story 1. In 2013, I was a kitchen cook at a sports bar. It was a busy Friday night. Around 9 p.m., I finally had enough time to take a break. I went into the men's room and heard some grunting. Not like someone using the toilet, but actual pig grunting. I opened the stall door to a toilet. There was a little piglet trotting around under the stalls, just oinking away. It was amazing and not unpleasant at all. Somebody had just left a piglet in the bathroom. We called animal control and they safely took the little piglet in. Story 2. A large stool in a single piece that was the length and girth of a foot-long submarine sandwich. How someone passed it whole I will never be able to understand. Story 3. It is upsetting how much urine can be found on the floor of a urinal. I am not even referring to a bar. Story 4. In 2012, Boca Raton, Florida, I walked into the men's room at a Barnes & Noble. A man was standing at the sink with his pants around his ankles, with a river of feces running down his legs, trying to clean up. Suddenly, I didn't have to urinate anymore. I turned right around and walked out, as did the man behind me. He looked at me and said, "Bro, what was that?" I actually felt terrible for the man. Life happens, and sometimes people have accidents for various reasons. That incident still sticks out in my mind. Story 5. I worked at a service station. A woman left her baby on the change table and drove off. We eventually heard the baby crying. The baby was fine once I picked it up. I was 17, and the other person with me was 19. Neither of us knew what to do with the baby, so he called his aunt who lived a block away, and she came down. Then we called the police. Story 6. Once I came across a single sock. The more I thought about it, the worse it got. If someone was changing their socks, I might have found a pair of abandoned socks. Are they now walking 1 foot bare through the dirty restroom? If they brought a spare sock with them and abandoned it afterward, what were they using it for? Creeped me out. Story 7. A long time ago on the beach boardwalk, a man was behaving inappropriately. I immediately left the area. Story 8. Years ago, while deployed, we heard a rifle shot that sounded like it came from within the forward operating base. I found a young Marine in a portable toilet who had taken his own life. Story 9. I was at Neptune's Net some time ago and they had no water, at least for flushing toilets. People apparently continued to use the toilet until there was a huge conical hill of waste that you have ever seen in a toilet. It is 100 times worse than you imagine. Story 10. Close the walls. I worked at Lowe's, and for some reason, the cashiers were responsible for cleaning the restrooms. The mess was everywhere, so I used a garden hose, ran it from the janitor's closet to the bathroom, sprayed down the walls, and washed it all down the floor drain. Story 11. Someone literally defecated across the back of the seat. There is a brown stain splattered along the seat, as if they tried and succeeded. Story 12. At the train station in Niagara Falls, Canada, someone had defecated an unexpectedly large amount into every fixture. The toilets, the urinals, and the sinks. All of them were backed up and filled with a disgusting brown sludge. Story 13. Not that long ago, I went into a public restroom and was greeted by feces everywhere. In the sink, in the urinals, and all over the floor. It was truly vile. Story 14. African toilets. Maggots writhing in the hot sun at Kanda Beach long drop toilets, which were actually quite short under the bamboo platform. Squat toilet with no water and massively overflowing solid waste in Ngorongoro. Public toilets in Lusaka with ammonia so strong it was physically impossible to breathe. The best toilets in Africa that I encountered were freshly dug long drops with concrete lids at Lake Albert. Clean, dry, odor-free with great views. Highly recommended. Story 15. TJ Maxx. Guy coming out of the bathroom in a hurry and had severe sweating. The man missed the toilet. Half of the stool was on the floor, and the other half he broke like a slim snack was still floating in the toilet. I turned right around, walked out, and watched him walk around with a stain on his shorts looking for a change of clothing. Story 16. Worked at Sheetz in 2009, and there was a guy who loved Sheetz a little too much. He would leave evidence of his affection in the trash cans. It was unsettling for a while, but whenever he came in, One of the other employees or I would always wear double gloves and clean it up right after he left. I have also found needles there. There's a different reason why it is the worst, but still valid. Story 17. Portable toilets at a concert are one thing, but in the Midwest, where they get hauled around on a trailer, hitting bumps and splashing all over for the kids who are detasseling fields, those are the worst. Imagine everyone's story so far. Full of feces, blood, vomit, urine, all mixed and overflowing, not to mention the scorching heat during a Midwest summer, just baking the waste. Then there is the smell. It is enough to make me want to throw up every time I think about it. Story 18. I went to the restroom in one of the local malls, and a man was masturbating at one of the urinals. There were no dividers, and he was exposing himself without concern for the people coming to use the restroom. Another incident happened at the airport around 9 p.m. I came to pick up my mom and went to the restroom while her flight was landing. A man in his 20s was walking back and forth naked in the restroom. I don't know if he was drunk or under the influence, but he was clearly affected by something. Story 19. A person who injected drugs intravenously passed away while sitting on the toilet in a truck stop bathroom outside Memphis. They must have been there for at least a few days and smelled very bad. Story 20. The urinal at work was covered in blood. It was not diluted blood in urine, but as if someone had opened an artery and sprayed the entire urinal. Story 21. Some motorcycle friends and I were returning home from a weekend trip. We stopped in Knoxville at a BP gas station for gas and bathroom breaks. The restroom was a separate building out back, and it was a Sunday, so there were signs of Saturday night drunks. The door was locked, so I went to get the key. I opened it and looked inside. I couldn't believe what I saw. Bodily secretions, underwear, piles of dirty toilet paper. It was horrible. I was so desperate that I went in anyway since I only had to touch the doorknob and myself. I came out and said, I don't understand why they would even bother to lock this place. I guess they were afraid someone was going to come in and clean it. Story 22. About 20 years ago, my friend and I were road tripping up to Winnipeg and stopped at a rest area somewhere in North Dakota so I could use the restroom. I went into the men's restroom and stood at a urinal. A few seconds later, a man came up to the urinal directly next to me. There was a row of about 8 urinals and nobody else was there. This was a clear violation of unwritten social rules, but I was already midstream. After a few moments, as I was finishing, I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the man was now facing me. I zipped up and backed out. The man had his pants around his ankles, holding himself, smiling a disturbing smile with missing teeth as he was masturbating and asked me if it was going to rain today. I left immediately. Story 23. The Arizona Veterans Memorial Coliseum used to have troughs instead of urinals. That was uncomfortable, as there were 2 rows of them facing each other about 4 feet apart. This is where the Phoenix Suns played in the 1980s and early 1990s before their arena was built. Not much happens there these days, aside from the state fair and occasional concerts. The troughs may still be there. Story 24. I was propositioned as I was walking out of a bathroom in Union Station, Washington, D.C., by a man who complimented the size of my private parts after looking at them while I was using a urinal. I was 15 years old. Story 25. Half the female population eats wet cat food and smears feces on the walls of restrooms. At least that is what I would say if I were merely comparing the conditions of men's and women's restrooms at the grocery store where I used to work when I was a child. Story 26. In varying degrees of worst thing. 1. An older coworker of mine went to the bathroom, had a heart attack, and died there. Everything else I have seen has come exclusively from women's bathrooms during my short time as a janitor. 1. Miscarriages. 2. Finger painting with menstrual blood. 3. Finger painting with diarrhea. 4. Feces on the floor, walls, back of the toilet, toilet paper roll, in fact, everywhere except on the immaculately clean toilet. 5. An elderly woman. I was a janitor at a casino. You could tell when welfare checks arrived because senior citizens would come in like an army. One elderly woman would come in, gamble away her check, and then defecate all over the bathroom, presumably as revenge for losing it all. Like clockwork, Every month she would soil the entire bathroom. Once, when it was my turn to clean the bathroom, she had passed out there, naked and covered in liquid feces from the waist down. We had to call an ambulance for her. Story 27. Portable toilet at the county fair. One glance and you just close the door and run away scared. Enough said. Story 28. I worked as a lifeguard a long time ago. I worked a double shift and then a pool party, so it was like a 12-hour shift. It was a single guard neighborhood pool. I guess someone at the pool party got very drunk and decided to go into the bathroom and smear feces on everything in the bathroom. The walls, sink, even some on the ceiling. To this day, I don't know what would possess someone to do that. I walked in to make sure no one was there before I locked up and saw the mess. I thought, this is not worth minimum wage. The manager was very angry, but I did not get fired. In hindsight, I think I could have very easily argued that I did not have the tools and personal protective equipment to adequately clean it up. Story 29. Working retail, I was told there was a mess in the restroom and had to clean it up. You know in cartoons how when something smells bad or is extremely messy, there is a green stinky gas effect coming from the source? That's what I saw. A cloud of red and brown just radiating from the source of the problem. The floor was covered in a light shade of brown with a little blood red. There wasn't a lot of red, but you could tell something terrible had happened. After a while, I found the source. A customer had used several pieces of clothing to wipe himself. He left them and evidence of his lack of accuracy all over the toilet. He only partially made it in the bowl and left a trail from the bathroom to the front door of the store. Story 30. You know that Eddie Murphy clip where he looks around in horror at the ceiling? My boss saw the bathroom was left like that and told me to go and clean it before promptly leaving for the night. I took him by the shoulders the next day and informed him that if he did that again, I would make him clean the mess in his next shift. Story 31. You know the large toilet paper dispensers with the very large roll of paper? Well, someone took the cover off, defecated in it, then put it back on. Story 32. I was working a shutdown at a chemical plant, and due to the extra workers on site, they had portable toilets all over. One portable toilet had clearly missed regular service because it was full. The bottom of the lid was touching solid waste. I suspect someone had been using it and adding to the contents. I left the area, sealed the door with duct tape, wrapped it in barricade tape, and attached a lockout tag to the door handle with the words "toilet clogged" on it. Story 33. The weirdest was the waistband of some man's underwear. Literally, it was just the torn-off waistband on, I think, the handle of one of the urinals. The most horrible situation to deal with was when the women's restroom flooded at my workplace. We had to shut down early that night because water was not only covering the floor of the restroom, it was getting into the dining area. What happened was that one of the mentally unwell homeless people, a woman who would get snippy with some of the people who were kind enough to help her, used an entire container of wet wipes on herself and ended up flushing them, or rather failing to do so. Managing the flooding before we shut off the water to the toilet was not fun. Story 34. I was brushing my teeth when someone walked in and sat down to use the bathroom. I heard a metallic screech and a loud thud, followed by every toilet in the bathroom overflowing, ejecting waste up to the ceiling, like a shotgun blast. Except for a suspicious area above where the person was sitting. I just walked out as if nothing happened. Story 35. I was in Southern California a few years ago visiting family. I had never been to Venice Beach and wanted to check it out. When I got to the beach and parked, I could feel my stomach grumble. I needed to use the bathroom immediately. I was rushing down the boardwalk looking for a bathroom, any bathroom. All the restaurants had signs for customers only, and while I planned to grab lunch, now was not the time to make that kind of decision. Then I saw it, the outdoor public stalls at Venice Beach. I rushed over and reached out to pull a stall open, but was greeted by a woman shouting at me and a stench so powerful it almost knocked me over. In the brief moment I looked inside the stall, all I saw was a homeless woman standing in front of what I assumed were all of her belongings, stuffed wall to wall in that tiny space. Needless to say, I slammed the stall door and rushed to the nearest restaurant. Story 36. I was going to clean the women's bathroom at a fast food restaurant one night when I found blood everywhere. On the toilet, The floor, the trash can, the sink, and the walls. It was horrible and smelled awful. Story 37. It was not the worst thing. That would be a diarrhea incident that my kitchen manager wanted me to clean. I quit that job immediately, but it was something more impressive. I was at the mall and went to use the restroom. There was a piece of feces about the size of a toddler's arm just sitting there. It was the largest I have ever seen in my life. The person probably knew it was too large, which is likely why they did not attempt to flush it. It was solid, shaped like a baseball bat, half in the water and half sticking out. I was honestly astonished. I decided to leave it there and use a different stall. It was like an exhibit. Story 38. In my dorm building during my freshman year of college, maintenance would come by at 7 a.m., Monday through Friday, and that was it. There was a guy on my floor who consistently clogged a toilet at exactly 7:05 every Friday morning, and facilities never sent anyone to fix it until the following Monday. There were about 30 guys living on that floor and only 2 toilets. I have no idea how he managed this, but the worst time the toilet was clogged with a large wad of feces and toilet paper mixed together. All of the water was gone, and the entire inside of the bowl was coated in a thin layer of waste. It remained like that for the whole weekend. Story 39. I went to the bathroom at a rave in the warehouse project in Manchester, United Kingdom. I glanced into an open cubicle with a group of people inside and saw a person unconscious on the floor. A friend was rapidly pulling a chain of condoms tied together out of the unconscious person's throat. It turned out that the unconscious person had filled the condoms with drugs, tied them together, and then placed a loop of the last condom between his back molars like dental floss before swallowing the chain, hoping to regurgitate them later. His friend was pulling the chain out like a magician performing a trick. One of the balloons had popped and the person overdosed. Throughout this time, they were all on the floor, soaked in urine. Story 40. A woman stood at the sink fully clothed, slowly lathering her hair, clothes, and glasses with soap. Then she stared at me. I left. Story 41. I have seen my fair share of large turds and feces splatters from floor to ceiling, but things became much more interesting when I purchased an ultraviolet flashlight last year. Now it is something of a guilty pleasure to find the grimiest gas station restrooms, turn off the lights, and shine my ultraviolet light. Every surface lights up in vivid colors. It is almost celestial. The smell is still awful, though. I am only in there for a few seconds. Story 42. Someone had a massive bowel movement in the restroom of my university. It was really messy, and the person did not even flush it. Story 43. It was not in a washroom but during site cleanup that I once found a used woman's sanitary pad that had also been used as toilet paper. I had to find a less objectionable piece of garbage to protect myself so I could pick it up. Usually, it is just empty chip bags, so I do not use a picker. Story 44. One time I walked into a bathroom as a very frail old man was leaving, and there was feces splattered everywhere, on all 3 walls, the floor, and behind the toilet. That was the worst bathroom mess I have ever seen. Story 45. Popular river at the beginning of steelhead season. The waste in the portable toilet was above the seat. I did not have to urinate that badly. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.